The THERR-ə-min, THERR-ə unregistered trademark min. Originally known as the etherphone, thereminophone or termenvox. Thereminvox is an early electronic musical instrument controlled without physical contact by the thereminist. It is named after the westernized name of its Russian inventor, copyright on THERR-ə-min, who patented the device in 1928. The instrument's controlling section usually consists of two metal antennas which sense the relative position of the thereminist's hands and control oscillators for frequency with one hand, and amplitude with the other. The electric signals from the THERR-ə-min are amplified and sent to a loudspeaker. The THERR-ə-min was used in movie soundtracks such as Mikla Cube des Rankin-Cubes for Spellbound and The Lost Weekend and Bernard Herrmann's For the Day the Earth Stood Still and as the theme tune for the ITV drama Midsummer Murders. This has led to its association with a very eerie sound. Theremins are also used in concert music and in popular music genres such as rock. Psychedelic rock bands in particular, such as Hawkwind, have often used the THERR-ə-min in their work. History. The THERR-ə-min was originally the product of Russian government-sponsored research into proximity sensors. The instrument was invented by a young Russian physicist named Lev Sergeyevich Theremin in October 1920 after the outbreak of the Russian Civil War. After a lengthy tour of Europe, during which time he demonstrated his invention to packed houses, Theremin found his way to the United States, where he patented his invention in 1928. Subsequently, Theremin granted commercial production rights to RCA. Although the RCA thereminvox was not a commercial success, it fascinated audiences in America and abroad. Clara Rockmore, a well-known thereminist, toured to wide acclaim, performing a classical repertoire in concert halls around the United States, often sharing the bill with Paul Robeson. During the 1930s Lucy Bigelow Rosen was also taken with the THERR-ə-min and together with her husband Walter Bigelow Rosen provided both financial and artistic support to the development and popularization of the instrument. In 1938, Theremin left the United States, though the circumstances related to his departure are in dispute. Many accounts claim he was taken from his New York City apartment by KGB agents, taken back to the Soviet Union and made to work in a Sharashka laboratory prison camp at Magadan, Siberia. He reappeared 30 years later. In his 2000 biography of the inventor, THERR-ə-min, Ether Music and Espionage, Albert Glinsky suggested the Russian had fled to escape crashing personal debts, and was then caught up in Stalin's political purges. In any case, THERR-ə-min did not return to the United States until 1991. After a flurry of interest in America following the end of the Second World War, the THERR-ə-min soon fell into disuse with serious musicians, mainly because newer electronic instruments were introduced that were easier to play. However, a niche interest in the THERR-ə-min persisted, mostly among electronics enthusiasts and kit-building hobbyists. One of these electronics enthusiasts, Robert Moog, began building THERR-ə-mins in the 1950s, while he was a high school student. Moog subsequently published a number of articles about building THERR-ə-mins, and sold THERR-ə-min kits which were intended to be assembled by the customer. Moog credited what he learned from the experience as leading directly to his groundbreaking synthesizer, the Moog. Since the release of the film THERR-ə-min, An Electronic Odyssey in 1994, the instrument has enjoyed a resurgence in interest and has become more widely used by contemporary musicians. Even though many THERR-ə-min sounds can be approximated on many modern synthesizers, some musicians continue to appreciate the expressiveness, novelty and uniqueness of using an actual THERR-ə-min. The film itself has garnered excellent reviews. Today Moog Music, Dan Burns of SoundsLikeBurns.com, Chuck Collins of Thereminophone.com, Wavefront Technologies, Keys and Keller and Harrison Instruments manufacture performance-quality THERR-ə-mins. THERR-ə-min kit building remains popular with electronics buffs. Kits are available from Moog Music, THEReminophone, Harrison Instruments, PAIA Electronics, and Jayca. On the other end of the scale, many low-end THERR-ə-mins, some of which have only pitch control, are offered online and offline, sometimes advertised as toys. Operating principles. The THERR-ə-min is distinguished among musical instruments in that it is played without physical contact. The musician stands in front of the instrument and moves their hands in the proximity of two metal antennas. The distance from one antenna determines frequency, and the distance from the other controls amplitude. Most frequently, the right hand controls the pitch and the left controls the volume, although some performers reverse this arrangement. Some low-cost theremins use a conventional, knob-operated volume control and have only the pitch antenna. While commonly called antennas, they are not used for receiving or broadcasting radio frequency, but act as plates in a capacitor. The theremin uses the heterodyne principle to generate an audio signal. The instrument's pitch circuitry includes two radio frequency oscillators. One oscillator operates at a fixed frequency. The frequency of the other oscillator is controlled by the performer's distance from the pitch control antenna. The performer's hand acts as the grounded plate of a variable capacitor in an LC circuit, which is part of the oscillator and determines its frequency. The difference between the frequencies of the two oscillators at each moment allows the creation of a different tone in the audio frequency range, resulting in audio signals that are amplified and sent to a loudspeaker. To control volume, the performer's other hand acts as the grounded plate of another variable capacitor. In this case, the capacitor detunes another oscillator. That detuning is processed to change the attenuation in the amplifier circuit. The distance between the performer's hand and the volume control antenna determines the capacitance, which regulates the theremin's volume. Modern circuit designs often simplify this circuit and avoid the complexity of two heterodyne oscillators by having a single pitch oscillator, akin to the original theremin's volume circuit. This approach is usually less stable and cannot generate the low frequencies that a heterodyne oscillator can. Better designs may use two pairs of heterodyne oscillators, for both pitch and volume. Performance technique. Important in theremin articulation is the use of the volume control antenna. Unlike touched instruments, where simply halting play or damping a resonator silences the instrument, the thereminist must play the rests, as well as the notes, as Clara Rockmore observed. Although volume technique is less developed than pitch technique, some thereminists have worked to extend it, especially Pamelia Kirsten with her walking bass technique and Rupert Chappell. Recent versions of the theremin have been functionally updated. The Moog thereminvox, while functionally still a theremin, can also be used as a MIDI controller, and as such allows the artist to control any MIDI-compatible synthesizer with it, using the theremin's continuous pitch to drive modern synths. The Harrison Instruments Model 302 theremin uses symmetrical horizontal plates instead of a vertical rod and horizontal loop to control pitch and volume, with the volume increasing as the hand approaches the plate. Uses: concert music. Concert composers who have written for theremin include Bohuslav Martina, Percy Griner, Christian Wolff, Joseph Schillinger, Moritz Egert, Iraida Yusupova, Jorge Antunes, Vladimir Komarov, Anis Fulian, and Fazzer ±Lc. Another large-scale theremin concerto is Kaleviahu's Concerto for Theremin and Chamber Orchestra 8 Seasons, written for Carolina Eck. Maverick composer Percy Griner chose to use ensembles of 4 or 6 theremins for his 2 earliest experimental free music compositions because of the instrument's complete gliding freedom of pitch. Musician Jean-Michel Jarre used the instrument in his concerts Oxygen in Moscow and Space of Freedom in Gdańsk, providing also a short history of la copyright on theremin's life. The 5-piece Spaghetti Western Orchestra use a theremin as a replacement for Edo Della Orso's vocals in their interpretation of Ennio Morricone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Popular music. Theremins and theremin-like sounds started to be incorporated into popular music from the end of the 1940s, and this continued, with varying popularity, to the present. While the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations features an instrument that sounds much like a theremin, in fact the sound is made by an instrument called the tarnarin. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin used a variation of the theremin during performances of Whole Lotta Love, and No Quarter throughout the performance history of Led Zeppelin, an extended multi-instrumental solo featuring theremin and bowed guitar in 1977, as well as the soundtrack for Death Wish 2 released in 1982. Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones also used the instrument on the group's 1967 albums Between the Buttons, and their Satanic Majesty's request. Although credited with a theremin, SIG on the Mysterons track from the album Dummy, Portis had actually used a monophonic synthesizer to achieve theremin-like effects, as confirmed by Adrian Utley, who is credited as playing the instrument. He has also created similar sounds on the songs Half Day Closing, Humming, The Rip, and Machine Gun. Film music. Russian composer Dmitry Shostakovich was one of the first to incorporate parts for the theremin in orchestral pieces, including a use in his score for the film Odna. While the theremin was not widely used in classical music performances, the instrument found great success in many motion pictures, notably, Spellbound, The Red House, The Lost Weekend, The Spiral Staircase, Rocket Ship XM, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Thing, and The Ten Commandments. The theremin is played and identified as such in use in the Jerry Lewis movie The Delicate Delinquent. The theremin is prominent in the score for the 1956 short film A Short Vision, which was aired on The Ed Sullivan Show the same year, used by the Hungarian composer Matthias Szabó. More recent appearances in film scores include Monster House, Edward and the Machinist. The DVDs for Edward, Bartleby and The Day the Earth Stood Still and Spellbound include short features on the theremin. Robbie Virus, the founder and theremin player of the band Project Pimento, was featured on the soundtrack to the movie Hellboy. A theremin was not used for the soundtrack of Forbidden Planet, for which Louis and Beeb Barron built disposable oscillator circuits and a ring modulator to create the electronic tonalities for the film. Los Angeles-based thereminist Charles Richard Lester is featured on the soundtrack of Monster House and has performed the U.S. premiere of Gavril Popov's 1932 score for Komsomol, patron of electrification with the LA Philharmonic and Esa-Pekka Sorlinen in 2007. Television. Apart from a few episodes where an electronic organ or synthesizer was used, the theremin-like sound on the original Star Trek theme was actually provided by renowned studio soprano Luli Jean Norman until her voice was removed in later seasons. Soprano Arlene Carlson sang part of the theme when CBS Paramount TV remastered the program's title sequence in 2006. In October 2008, comedian, musician and theremin enthusiast Bill Bailey played a theremin during his performance of Bill Bailey's remarkable Guide to the Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall, which has subsequently been televised. He has previously also written an article, presented a radio show and incorporated the theremin in some of his televised comedy tours. Video games. Composer Gary Ehrman used a theremin for the musical score of the 2005 video game Destroy All Humans. Lydia Kavina's solo theremin is featured on the soundtrack for the 2006 MMORPG computer game Soul of the Ultimate Nation, composed by Howard Shaw. Similar instruments, the Ons Martenet 1928, also uses the principle of heterodyning oscillators, but has a keyboard as well as a slide controller and is touched while playing. The Electro theremin, built by Bob Whitzel in the 1950s, does not use heterodyning oscillators and has to be touched while playing, but it allows continuous variation of the frequency range and sound similar to the theremin. Trautonium, a monophonic electronic musical instrument by Friedrich Trautmann, invented in 1929, the Persephone, an analog fingerboard synthesizer with CV and MIDI, inspired by the Trautonium. The Persephone allows continuous variation of the frequency range from 1 to 10 octaves. The ribbon is pressure and position sensitive. The Electron, invented in 1929 by Martin Taubman, has an antenna for pitch control, a handheld switch for articulation and a foot pedal for volume control. The syntheremin is an extension of the theremin. The Croix Sonore is based on the theremin. It was developed by Russian composer Nicolas Abatchov in France, after he saw Lev Theremin demonstrate the theremin in 1924. The terpsitone, also invented by Theremin, consisted of a platform fitted with space-controlling antennae, through and around which a dancer would control the musical performance. By most accounts, the instrument was nearly impossible to control. Of the three instruments built, only the last one, made in 1978 for Lydia Kavina, survives today. The ZVEX effects fuzz probe, wah probe and tremolo probe, using a theremin to control said effects. The fuzz probe can be used as a theremin, as it can through feedback oscillation create tones of any pitch. The Haken Continuum fingerboard uses a continuous, flat playing surface along which the player slides his fingers to create the desired pitch and timbre values. Describable as a continuous pitch controller that resembles a keyboard, but has no keys. The MC505 by Roland being able using the integrated D-beam sensor like a theremin. The Otamatone by the CubeWorks company, which is played by sliding the fingers up and down a stem to control a 3-level pitch sound. The Audio Cubes by Persephone are light-emitting smart blocks which have 4 sensors on each side. The sensors measure the distance to your hands to control an effect or sound. A musical saw, also called a singing saw, is the application of a hand saw as a musical instrument. The sound creates an ethereal tone, very similar to the theremin. The musical saw is classified as a friction idiophone with direct friction under the Hornbostel-Sachs system of musical instrument classification. A 3-radio theremin invented by Tomoe Yamamoto, composed of 3 independent radio sets. Radio set number 1 is to listen and to record the signal at around 1600 kHz. Radio set number 2 is tuned at 1145 kHz so that its local oscillator of around 1600 kHz is to be received by radio set number 1. Radio set number 3 is also tuned at 1145 kHz so that its local oscillator may produce the beat with radio set number 2. Operator's hand movement around bar antenna of radio set number 3 may affect the local oscillator to produce tonal change. The Chimera, polymagnetophonic theremin, is a digital offspring of theremin and touchless ribbon controller and based on distant sensing of permanent magnets. An array of linear Hall effect sensors, each acting as an individual theremin in a changing magnetic field, responds to multiple moving neodymium magnets worn on fingers and forms a continuous interaction space in 2 dimensions. See also, List of Russian inventions, references. Publications, Rockmore, Clara. Method for theremin. Edited by David Miller and Jeffrey McFarlane Johnson. Made publicly available at Clara Rockmore Method for theremin, PDF, Eck, Carolina. The Art of Playing the Theremin. Berlin, SERVI Verlag. ISBN A3-933757-08-ATA, Glinsky, Albert. Theremin, Ether Music and Espionage. Urbana, Illinois, University of Illinois Press. ISBN A0-252-02582-2. Film and Video, Martin, Stephen M. Theremin, An Electronic Odyssey Orion MGM, Lydia Kavina, Clara Rockmore, William Olson. Mastering the Theremin and DVD. Moog Music and Little Big Films. External links, thereminworld.com, Amelia Kirsten on TED.com, Theremin Times, thereminvox.com, TECI, Theremin Enthusiasts Club International, Theremin Family, Moriarty, Philip. The Theremin. 60 Symbols. Brady Heron for the University of Nottingham A. The first group to record with a theremin was Freddie and the Hitchhikers in 1961, on the song Oe Sinersa which was released on Bandbox Records of Denver, Colorado, number 251. Oe Sinersa was covered by the Cramps on their Flamajob album in 1994 but without the use of the theremin. Oe Sinersa was also re-released on the 2006 Grammy-nominated Oe Rockin' Beneza box set from Rhino Records in 2006.